The Department of Education serves an important function in our country in not only providing critical supplemental funding to schools across the nation, but also to ensuring equitable access to education for all youth in our country. They play a crucial role in supporting both increasing graduation rates for students overall, but also in improving outcomes for students with disabilities through funding, policy, and enforcement of laws like the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA, ensuring access to quality education and services and promoting best practices. The IDEA is a federal law that ensures students with disabilities receive free, appropriate public education tailored to their individual needs. I wanted to highlight some of the important impacts of the Department of Education in light of the recent politically motivated attacks by the current administration, with a special focus on the vulnerable populations the department helps. My first data set came from public elementary secondary education finance data from the U.S. Census Department, breaking down revenue and expenditures at a school district level, which I aggregated up to a county level. This led to two visualizations, one clear path of the percent of funding from each school district aggregated at the county level, and the other the U.S. average of overall spending from any source per pupil. Using the slider, we can see how over time the federal government through the DOE has contributed in greater or less proportions to the K through 12 public education across the country. I wanted to call out how the color scale is at an exponential scale in order to highlight the differences in counties which are funded primarily between 5 and 30%. So they end up getting grouped at the bottom if I use a linear scale. Also note that the red X rule below is synced to the year of the slider to show per pupil spending at each specified time. There are two interesting time periods, just after 2008 and 2010, showing a time where schools did not spend more per pupil but did rely more on DOE for funding than later on, when COVID happened in 2020, reliance on federal funding increased, as well as spending at the same time, so a bit different from what happened in 2010. The next data set I used was public high school graduation rates, specifically the adjusted cohort graduation rate by state, which I had from 2013 to 2022 from the National Center for Education Statistics. This collection of data details graduation rates by sex, race, disability, and other factors such as English language proficiency. I aggregated our county level finance data to a state level for comparison and used per pupil spending adjusted for regional price parity, which I sourced from the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Economic Analysis. For this visualization, I focused on outcomes for two populations, the 5 states with the greatest increase in per pupil spending and the 5 with the smallest increase in per pupil spending. The top line plot shows graduation rates since 2013, and the lower plot shows the adjusted per pupil spending. On the right is the states with the most increased spending, and on the left shows the states with the least increase. The slider helps highlight the exact figures during each year. One interesting thing here is that you do not see a noticeably greater increase in graduation rates for those states with the greater increases in spending. However, you also notice that these states started out with that these states that did increase their spending to a greater proportion did start out with already high graduation rates. It does appear harder to increase already high graduation rates, as you can see reflected on those states with lower increases of spending who already started with higher graduation rates. Now I want to move on to a more specific and vulnerable population, youth with disabilities. This information comes primarily from the adjusted cohort graduation tables, with the specific selection of states made from the education finance data, and gives us a view into the increase of graduation rates for disabled youth from 2013 to 2022. Top visualization shows 5 states with the greatest proportional increase in overall spending on special education, which encapsulates a wide range of accommodations for educational needs. And the bottom shows 5 states where funding for these programs actually decreased. These are the states where funding decreased the most. While the difference between the top and right may not seem obvious at first glance, a close look at the difference between the light green 2013 rates and the darker green 2022 rates for these populations show how this greater increase in spending may have directly resulted in increased graduations for states at the top. On the top. The overall sad part being that these rates are still very low when compared to overall population graduation rates, which I do not show here. My final dataset, and I hope most impactful visualization, is a merge of the public school funding dataset and population disability characteristics at a county level sourced from the U.S. Census Bureau. This bivariate chloroplath shows the proportion of special education funding coming from federal sources versus the proportion of grade school aged youth with disabilities in 2022. The more pink to dark blue in the county, the greater proportion of public education funding for students with disabilities comes from the Department of Education, while the more teal to dark blue colors show larger portions of youth who likely need to take advantage of this type of education program in those counties. The tooltip available allows you to hover over each county to see the funding and population proportions. The really important thing to see here is how many counties are pink, purple, and dark blue, showing how the special education programs in those counties receive a significant proportion of their funding from the federal government through the DOE. This highlights how these underhanded attacks are likely to devastate some of our most vulnerable populations in significant proportions of the country. My questions for you are, could coloring or labeling on any of these make their message more clear? Do you think Can you think of any other outcomes I can include to show how important the DOE is? Do you notice any features in any of these plots which would help make them more impactful, for example, different populations or other data? Thank you for watching.